The chamber stretched like a cathedral carved from obsidian, and silence pressed on Ethan Vale's chest like a mountain. Shackles cut into his wrists, as he was forced to kneel before the tribunal. Magistrate Sora's voice broke the stillness, cold and merciless, declaring, "Humanity is guilty of unrestrained chaos." His words struck like iron hammers, and every syllable echoed across the vast hall. Ethan felt billions of unseen eyes upon him, fleets orbiting, civilizations watching as history weighed its gavel. He tried to raise his head, but the guards pushed it lower until stone bit his knees. He tasted dust and blood. The declaration came without pause. The sentence is extermination. The chamber trembled with restrained anticipation, and Ethan's breath stuttered in his throat. In that hollow silence after the words fell, despair swelled like a flood. Then from the darkness behind a whisper slithered close, unseen but burning. "They are not just judging you. They are judging us all." The words echoed long after silence returned, and Ethan's lungs refused to draw air. The chamber remained frozen, each being transfixed by the spectacle of judgment. Beyond the walls, fleets hovered in orbit, their weapons primed. Humanity's end was not a metaphor but a countdown. Ethan tried to steady his heartbeat, each thud a hammer inside his chest. Admiral Petra Stone's image shimmered into view, her voice smooth and practiced as she addressed the galaxy. She spoke not of defiance but of obedience, urging submission as the path to survival. Her polished tone contrasted with Ethan's bleeding lips. He clenched his jaw, furious yet shackled, while the crowd nodded in silent agreement. Petra's betrayal rang louder than the judge's decree. Humanity's chains were not only forged by aliens but also by those once trusted. The tribunal chamber dimmed, leaving only the cold spotlight over Ethan. His heart raced as he felt the crushing weight of every unseen witness. He forced himself to lift his chin, though guards pressed down hard. In his silence, the trial became spectacle, a theater of condemnation. Alien lips curled in disdain, eyes glittering with predatory interest. Ethan's defiance lay not in words, but in the fire he refused to extinguish in his gaze. It was then that he noticed Counselor Neary's glance. Her eyes, softer than those around her, carried a flicker of something rare, doubt. She did not speak, but her silence screamed louder than Petra's words. Ethan's pulse slowed, steadying in that moment. He realized not all in the chamber were made of stone. Ethan was dragged back to his cell, iron boots of the guards clanging against obsidian floors. His chains scraped as sparks spat from stone. The corridors hummed with low energy, walls pulsing faintly as if alive. His body ached, but his spirit clung to one fragile thread of endurance. The cell door sealed shut with a thunderous hiss, and darkness fell like a heavy curtain. He leaned against cold stone, breath ragged. For a moment, silence reigned until a whisper emerged again, curling through the air. "If you want truth, survive tomorrow." The voice carried no mercy, only command. Ethan closed his eyes, heart pounding with dread and strange resolve. Tomorrow would bring torment designed to break him, yet somewhere in the shadows, there was a purpose waiting. In the silence of the cell, Ethan's thoughts became heavier than chains. The verdict carved into his mind like steel, yet he clung to fragments of memory. Lena's laughter, long gone, replayed faintly, soft as if carried on the void. He whispered her name, but no sound emerged. Outside, the fleets loomed, a reminder that one body in chains could condemn billions. Ethan pressed his forehead against the cold wall, letting pain sharpen his focus. Fear threatened to suffocate him, but within that terror rose a spark. Survival was no longer about him. It was about all of humanity. And when the voice repeated, colder and closer this time, "Survive tomorrow," Ethan did not flinch. He inhaled, steady at last. The storm had only begun. The cold walls of the cell seemed to pulse with echoes of Ethan's memories, dragging him back to the firestorm that destroyed his home. He saw again the flames consuming steel towers, and the sky painted orange with smoke. His lungs burned as if the ash had returned to choke him. He remembered Lena's cry fading beneath collapsing rubble, her small hand slipping from his grasp forever. He pressed his fists against his knees, his body trembling. The tribunal thought they had chosen a weak man, but they had chained the only survivor of that night. Ethan whispered, "You will not erase her," though no one heard but the stone. The scars etched on his body were not marks of weakness, but reminders that he had already walked through hell and had not broken. The memory shifted, pulling him to the battlefield where he had once crawled through mud, thick with blood. His uniform was torn, his body shattered, yet he dragged others to safety. Every scar etched into his skin and told the story of refusing to surrender. The tribunal had not seen those nights when silence hung heavy and survival meant stealing a final breath from fire. They saw only numbers and statistics. Ethan leaned back against the wall, his chest heaving as ghosts of comrades called his name. He whispered, "You thought me expendable, but I carried them all." The ache of betrayal lanced through his chest, yet his spirit remained unbroken. Every memory carved deeper into him until his very being screamed that endurance was his weapon. Voices rose inside his head, echoes of comrades who had sworn loyalty and later vanished into betrayal. Ethan recalled their laughter turning to silence, and the moments their eyes averted as he fell. Trust had been fractured like glass under pressure, sharp fragments that never healed. He had carried that fracture into this trial, a reminder that betrayal was not new. The tribunal was just another mask over the same cruelty. His jaw tightened as he whispered to the darkness, "I know abandonment. It cannot kill me." The silence swallowed his vow, but his spirit steadied. Pain became his fuel, not his cage. Each scar whispered of survival, and every broken promise forged a fire inside him that no alien judgment could extinguish. The door opened with a hiss, and Marcus Hale stepped in, his uniform gleaming as though untouched by war. His eyes were cold, calculating as if pity were his chosen weapon. He spoke softly, "You don't need to fight, Ethan. Accept their rule, and at least humanity will survive." Ethan lifted his gaze, fury and disbelief colliding in his chest. Marcus had once stood beside him in trenches, swearing never to yield. Now his words dripped with venom disguised as reason. Ethan's voice rasped, "Survival without soul is death." Marcus smirked, untouched by shame, and turned away. The echo of his boots faded, but his betrayal seared deeper than wounds ever could. Darkness returned after Marcus left, and Ethan's mind drifted to Lena. He remembered her laughter echoing across shattered courtyards, the fragile hope she carried when all else burned. She was the anchor that bound him to something beyond pain. Though the aliens sought to strip him of dignity, they could not erase her memory. He whispered her name into the silence, and for a fleeting moment it seemed the chamber listened. His chest rose with a steadier breath, and his eyes hardened. Tomorrow promised torment, yet he clung to Lena's image like a shield. Humanity's trial was his own, but her memory made him unyielding. Survival was no longer a question. It was a duty. The chamber roared to life as the tribunal unveiled its evidence, walls flooding with holographic projections of war, genocide, and cruelty. Images twisted reality into a damning narrative, stripping humanity of every virtue. Ethan Vale's stomach churned as each frame painted him, not as a witness but as the embodiment of evil. He could see Earth's history torn from its soul, stripped of context, and molded into pure accusation. The gallery leaned forward, alien faces glowing with disgust. Magistrate Sora's voice lashed like a blade, declaring, "Humanity thrives on destruction." Ethan clenched his chains, his jaw aching with fury, knowing the stage was rigged. His voice cracked, "You see fire, but never the ones who carried water." Silence answered, heavy with disdain, and the air felt suffocating. Rows of human collaborators rose in their seats, their polished uniforms gleaming as if absolved by betrayal. They nodded eagerly, affirming the tribunal's charges. Admiral Petra Stone's face appeared among them, calm and authoritative, her words carrying false conviction. She declared that surrender was proof of wisdom, not weakness, while alien judges nodded in approval. Ethan's teeth ground as Petra's voice carved deeper wounds than shackles ever could. Every gesture of hers framed defiance as recklessness and submission as survival. The gallery hissed with agreement, and Ethan felt his people betrayed not only by the tribunal, but by those sworn to lead them. Rage burned within his chest, yet his body remained pressed down by chains, forced into the posture of guilt. Ethan finally forced words into the storm, his voice rough but sharp. You carve wounds deeper by silencing truth. Humanity is more than scars. His plea echoed, but Magistrate Sora only smirked, twisting Ethan's words into confession. So you admit scars define you, Sora said, his tone a blade slicing through intent. Laughter rippled among alien seats, cruel and hollow. Ethan's chest tightened as he realized his defense was being used against him, turned into new chains. The gallery hissed louder, venom thick in every breath. Ethan drew in air, steadying his voice, though no one listened. The injustice was not hidden, it was celebrated. He whispered to himself, "They want silence. They will not have mine." His eyes blazed, though his body remained bound. As the endless parade of crimes rolled across the walls, Ethan began to notice cracks in the display. A battle shown as humanity's slaughter concealed alien weapons that fired first. A supposed atrocity omitted the years of siege that provoked it. Each projection carried distortions, threads of manipulation hidden beneath spectacle. His heart pounded as realization formed. This was not justice, it was fabrication. He whispered to himself, "They fear us, so they paint monsters." The truth was buried under layers of lies, a stage crafted to erase dignity before execution. Ethan clenched his fists, his mind racing, but he knew no voice here would accept what he saw. The injustice was so carefully woven that only eyes searching for truth could see. Night descended, and Ethan was dragged once more into his cell. The silence pressed heavier than chains. He sat with his back against cold stone, shadows curling like serpents around him. His breath came ragged as images replayed, the false histories, the twisted words, the betrayal of Petra, and the alien sneers. Fury coiled into resolve. Then the whisper returned, closer this time, almost brushing his ear. "If you want the truth, you must survive what comes tomorrow." Ethan's heart stopped for a beat before resuming in thunder. Whoever the voice belonged to, it carried knowledge he needed. His head bowed, but his mind hardened. Tomorrow promised torment, but he swore he would endure. Lies could shackle him, but only survival could break them. The next day began with the grinding of heavy gates, and Ethan was hauled into an arena built from black steel and glass. The tribunal demanded proof of his kind's weakness not through words but through torment. Alien guards stripped him of dignity, pressing him to his knees under the scorching white light. Machines lowered chains with jagged hooks designed to test endurance. A voice announced, "This ordeal will reveal the truth." Ethan's muscles quivered as pain struck, but his jaw tightened. Around him, alien crowds leaned forward, eager to witness his collapse. Sweat burned his eyes, but he refused to break. He whispered, "You will not have my surrender." His voice, though ragged, carried into the silence, and even the tribunal seemed to still for a heartbeat. The torment deepened as alien figures forced him into a pit filled with shifting blades and searing heat. Each step was a trial meant to cut flesh and spirit. Ethan staggered, his body breaking, but his will clung tighter. Magistrate Sora's voice cut through, "See how quickly he crumbles." Yet Ethan raised his head, blood dripping down his chin, and spat words of defiance. "Crumbles? I stand where your kind would have fallen." A murmur swept through the chamber. Every lash of pain was meant to prove weakness, but it only carved resolve deeper into him. His legs shook, yet he dragged himself upright again and again. The ordeal was not destroying him. It was revealing what they feared most: humanity's refusal to die. Hours dragged, each moment an attempt to humiliate, to strip him of humanity. Ethan's chains dragged through sludge, his hands blistered from iron restraints, but his eyes held steady fire. He realized the patterns. Every trial was not punishment, but experiment. They tested his capacity to endure, not his crimes. In that clarity, fear twisted into fury. He whispered, "They do not punish us for cruelty, but for strength." Magistrate Sora narrowed his gaze, sensing the shift. Ethan straightened, even as blood ran down his arm. What they called ordeal was proof of their fear. The truth revealed itself not in his suffering, but in his survival. And for the first time, Ethan felt he was closer to understanding why this trial existed at all. From the shadows of the chamber, Marcus Hale emerged, his uniform immaculate, his expression sharp as a blade. He moved closer, voice smooth with venom. "This was never about justice, Ethan. It was always about fear." Ethan's heart clenched as recognition struck. The friend who once swore loyalty now revealed himself as conspirator. Marcus smirked, cold eyes gleaming. "They fear what humans can become, so I chose survival with them." Ethan spat blood, his voice cracking but fierce. "You chose betrayal, not survival." The chamber seemed to pause as Marcus leaned closer, whispering like poison. Humanity was doomed the moment it loved chaos more than order. The wound cut deeper than iron, yet Ethan's silence screamed louder than Marcus' words. As Marcus's footsteps faded, another whisper surfaced, layered and heavy, unlike the others. It carried across the chamber like a shadow with form. Ethan felt the air bend, the temperature drop. The voice was Car Ikes, the unseen hand behind the tribunal. "We orchestrate this not for justice but control," it said, echoing from every wall. Ethan's body shook, not from fear but from the enormity of the revelation. The trial was no accident. It was a plan to erase humanity before its strength grew beyond containment. His chains clattered as he straightened despite exhaustion, whispering, "Then you fear us more than you hate us." The silence that followed confirmed it. For the first time, Ethan understood. The verdict had already been written, but so had his defiance. The tribunal reconvened under the glow of fractured light, and Ethan stood chained at the center as Counselor Neary stepped forward. Unlike the others, her movements were deliberate, cautious, as though stepping into dangerous ground. She extended a shard of data hidden within her robes, projecting flickers of corrupted files. The images glitched, revealing how records of humanity's crimes had been edited, context erased, truth buried. Ethan's eyes widened, hope stirring for the first time amid despair. Neary's voice trembled, but carried steel. "The record is tainted. Justice cannot exist in lies." Magistrate Sora's glare burned cold, but murmurs spread through the gallery. Ethan whispered, "You risk everything," and Neary lowered her gaze, her silence enough to confirm it. The truth had found a fragile crack. Ethan drew strength from the revelation and lifted his head, his voice raw but unbroken. "You brand us as beasts, yet you fear what gives us life, our love, our endurance." His words carried through the chamber, no longer pleading but cutting. Magistrate Sora sneered, "Emotion blinds you, human." Ethan's lips curved in defiance. "Emotion makes us survive ruin, rebuild from ashes, and fight for more than ourselves." The chamber stirred, uncertain, as echoes of his words rippled through the audience. For the first time, doubt spread wider than control. Ethan felt the weight of eyes not filled with contempt but with conflicted silence. His chains rattled as he straightened, his body broken but his voice piercing sharper than steel. Humanity's defense had shifted from crime to spirit. The chamber doors opened, and Lena was brought forth, her small frame trembling under alien escort. Ethan's chest clenched as he saw her altered eyes glowing faintly, proof of alien manipulation. She looked at him with both recognition and confusion, her voice soft as a broken thread. "Ethan." The gallery leaned forward, sensing spectacle. Magistrate Sora declared, "Even your innocence is tainted." Ethan's eyes burned with fury, but he steadied his tone. She is not a symbol of corruption. She is proof of what you fear most, our future. Lena's lips quivered, torn between fear and longing, and Ethan's heart broke. But in that moment, he refused to let her become their weapon. His chains clattered as he whispered, "You will not use her against us." The murmurs in the chamber grew louder, rippling like a storm against silence. Ethan spoke again, voice rising over the chaos. He recounted mothers shielding children in crumbling cities, fathers digging graves with bare hands, strangers carrying strangers through fire. "We are not perfect," he said, "but we love even when the universe burns." Alien faces flickered with unease as the weight of his words pressed against the walls. Counselor Neary's gaze steadied him, and even some spectators looked away, shaken. Magistrate Sora's fists clenched tighter, veins glowing faintly with cold rage. Ethan felt power shift, not in chains breaking, but in hearts stirring. Love had begun to bend the tribunal's steel into something fragile. Doubt was no longer silence. It was a rising chorus. The gallery fell into fractured silence before Ethan spoke again, softer yet sharper than any blade. "We are not asking for mercy. We demand recognition." His voice cut across the tribunal, echoing beyond stone and steel, reaching fleets orbiting above. Screens flickered with his words across countless worlds, and billions watched as his broken figure stood unyielding. Magistrate Sora's composure wavered, but his glare sharpened. Ethan inhaled, his chest heaving, knowing the spark had been lit. Even as his body shook, his voice carried further than chains could hold. In that moment, the trial was no longer about judgment. It had become a broadcast of defiance. The seed of uprising had been planted, and humanity's fiercest weapon, love, was now unleashed into the galaxy. Magistrate Sora rose, his towering frame casting a shadow across the chamber. His voice cut through the silence like steel on stone. "The verdict is final. Humanity is to be exterminated." Ethan felt his knees weaken, but he forced himself upright despite chains digging deeper into his wrists. Guards stepped forward, weapons glowing, preparing to carry out the sentence. The gallery erupted in shouts, some triumphant, others uneasy. Ethan locked eyes with the tribunal, his chest heaving as the weight of extinction pressed down. He whispered, "Billions will die unseen, yet their fire will not end." The words were nearly drowned in the chaos, but they struck like sparks. The sentence had been delivered, but the chamber trembled with uncertainty. The hall fractured into uproar as factions within the gallery turned against each other. Some shouted for humanity's destruction, their voices sharp as blades. Others demanded truth, their anger swelling as Neary's revelations spread across the screens. The evidence of tampering blazed now in full view, corrupt files unraveling. The chamber once united in judgment now shook with riotous discord. Ethan stood in the storm, heart pounding as he realized the conspiracy could no longer hide in silence. The tribunal had lost control. Chains held his body, but the truth had shattered his cage. He whispered, "You cannot contain what has already spread." The galaxy beyond these walls was beginning to fracture, and the verdict was no longer theirs alone. Marcus Hale stepped forward, his voice cold and cutting, seizing the chaos to strike. "This is proof of your weakness," he shouted, pointing at Ethan. "You cling to emotion as if it were strength." His words rippled through the chamber, feeding fury. Ethan's gaze locked onto him, and his voice rang clear, piercing the noise. "Love is not weakness. Love is humanity's fiercest weapon." The chamber stilled for a breath, tension taut as a bowstring. Even the judges shifted uneasily at the power of the words. Marcus's smirk faltered, though his eyes still glimmered with venom. Ethan's body was failing, but his voice carried fire no chain could silence. In that moment, the trial turned into something greater than judgment. It became defiance carved in flame. The uproar reached a breaking point as guards surged forward, weapons raised. Then, in a blur, an ally broke ranks, a slender alien dissenter who had once lingered in silence. They shielded Ethan with their body, absorbing the strike meant for him. The blast tore through them, their form collapsing in a cascade of glowing embers. Ethan cried out, fury and grief twisting in his chest. The chamber gasped, stunned into silence by the sacrifice. Magistrate Sora's composure fractured, and for the first time, fear edged his voice. Ethan knelt over the fallen ally, whispering, "You saw us. You believed." The sacrifice ignited more than sorrow. It lit rebellion. The fire had spread beyond one man's voice. Now, it burned in blood and sacrifice. Admiral Petra Stone stormed into the chaos, her voice sharp as iron. "Order must be restored," she bellowed, but her commands fell into the storm of voices and unrest. Factions rioted, some tearing at restraints, others turning weapons on each other. Above, screens flickered with Ethan's words, his defiance spreading like wildfire. In the shadows, Karik's influence faltered, its web unraveling in public view. Ethan's chest heaved as he realized that no matter the Tribunal's decree, humanity had already won its place. He whispered, "Recognition has been carved in fire." Petra's eyes narrowed, but doubt cracked her certainty. The chamber quaked as the galaxy itself seemed to shift, and Ethan's broken figure stood as both target and beacon. The sentence remained carved into the air, but execution stalled as riots spread through the tribunal. Ethan Vale was dragged toward the platform, chains biting deeper with each step. "I know." Magistrate Sora's voice rang, demanding order, yet the crowd no longer obeyed. Factions fought, voices clashed, and silence had shattered beyond repair. Ethan stumbled but forced his body upright, whispering, "Even in chains we stand." His breath trembled, but his eyes blazed with fire. Humanity's survival was no longer a verdict. It had become a demand echoing through the galaxy. The chamber quaked as the galaxy outside fractured. Across countless worlds, factions erupted into protest, some demanding extermination, others screaming for justice. Ethan's defiance had traveled beyond the walls, carried on every broadcast. He staggered, but the fire in his words burned stronger than his broken body. He whispered, "You cannot silence what billions now feel." Petra Stone struggled to rally order, her voice drowned in uproar. For the first time, Ethan realized survival was not a possibility. It was already unfolding through rebellion. Magistrate Sora fixed his gaze on Ethan, but the tremor in his stance betrayed unease. The cold mask cracked for the first time as Ethan spoke louder. "You said emotion is weakness, yet it is the weapon you cannot kill." The chamber hushed, words cutting deeper than any blade. Even the council shifted, whispers breaking unity. For a moment, Ethan saw fear not of humanity's crimes, but of its resilience. He realized love had shaken the foundation of judgment itself. The tribunal was no longer invincible. When the dust settled, Ethan stood battered but unbroken, his gaze meeting Counselor Nere's. She stepped closer, her eyes soft yet resolute, and whispered, "Your fire has changed them." Around them, chaos still churned, but her words anchored him. Ethan nodded, blood drying on his lips, his chest heaving. In that moment, ally and prisoner shared the weight of survival. The galaxy's gaze had shifted, and recognition, however fragile, had been won in fire and sacrifice. At last, silence blanketed the tribunal, though it was heavy with fracture. Ethan walked from the chamber, still chained but no longer bowed. Billions had witnessed not an execution, but a warning. His voice lingered in memory, sharper than judgment. He whispered to himself, "They wanted a verdict. What they got was a warning." The galaxy would not forget. Humanity was scarred, watched and burdened, yet alive. And in the fire of that survival, a prophecy had begun.